Emma Clark grew up in a quiet town in Virginia, a place where most people's dreams didn't stretch too far beyond high school football games, steady jobs, and weekend barbecues. But Emma was never quite like the others. From an early age, she carried an almost restless energy, a need to push herself harder than anyone expected. While other children played tag or hid indoors with video games, Emma ran. She ran through backyards, along uneven sidewalks, and later on the trails of the state park, where she challenged herself to climb hills until their lungs burned. Her father, a retired Marine, often stood at the edge of the yard watching her. He never discouraged her. If anything, he quietly encouraged the fire he saw growing in her. He had served 3 tours overseas and returned with a deep respect for discipline and toughness, qualities he recognized in his daughter even when she was barely 10 years old. On Saturday mornings, he would take her to the old shooting range, teaching her how to line up targets and breathe steadily before pulling the trigger. She was small, her hands hardly strong enough to hold the rifle. But she had an instinct. "Don't force it," he would say, kneeling behind her. "Control it." By the time Emma entered high school, that lesson had already sunk in. Her classmates saw her as unusual. She wasn't the girl hanging out at malls or obsessing over dances. Instead, she stayed after school in the weight room, training beside the boys' football team. She wasn't trying to impress them. She wasn't even competing with them. She was competing only with herself. At night, she devoured books and documentaries about the Navy SEALs. The stories fascinated her: the grueling Hell Week, the near-impossible physical trials, and the idea of pushing the human body beyond normal limits. Where others saw the SEALs as unreachable legends, Emma saw them as a challenge waiting for her. Her friends thought it was a phase. "Come on, Emma," they'd laugh. "You can't be serious. You're not like them." But Emma never laughed back. She smiled politely, but inside, the comments sharpened her resolve. She didn't want to be like them. She wanted to be better. When she graduated high school, she skipped the parties and beach trips her classmates indulged in. Instead, she focused on college courses in physical education and psychology, all while working part-time and training harder each year. Her weekends weren't filled with relaxation. They were filled with cold water swims, long-distance runs with weighted packs, and endless shooting practice. By the time she was 22, Emma had turned herself into a machine of discipline. She could run 10 miles without breaking pace, swim across rivers in icy conditions, and perform hundreds of push-ups in a single session. Every metric used to test male recruits, she had already mastered them. That was when she knew she was ready. The day she applied for Navy SEAL training felt monumental, though outwardly she treated it like another task on her list. She filled out the application carefully, double-checking every box, every requirement. On paper, she was more than qualified, physically stronger than most, mentally sharper than many, and utterly committed. She dropped the application into the mail slot at the recruiter's office, her heart pounding as she walked back to her car. She imagined what it would feel like to get accepted. She pictured herself in training, shoulder to shoulder with other recruits, proving she could endure the same punishment, the same impossible trials. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Hell, weak broke even the toughest men, but she wanted the chance. More than that, she believed she had earned the chance. Weeks passed. Each day she checked her mailbox with quiet anticipation, though she told no one about it. She wanted the letter to come silently, without ceremony, without witnesses. She wanted to hold it in her hands first, before the world had the chance to judge her. And then, one afternoon, it was there. A plain white envelope, government seal pressed neatly into the corner. Her hands trembled as she slid a finger along the flap, carefully pulling out the sheet inside. Her eyes scanned the words quickly. Almost desperately, took less than 10 seconds for her to understand. Application denied. The sentence hit harder than any punch she had ever taken. She read it again, slower this time, as if she had misunderstood. But the words didn't change. She wasn't accepted. Not even given a chance. Emma sat down at the edge of her bed, the letter dangling in her hands. For a long time, she said. Nothing, thought nothing. The silence pressed heavy against her chest, and for the first time in years, doubt crept into her mind. Maybe the others were right. Maybe the dream had been foolish all along. But then she looked at the letter more carefully. The rejection didn't say she had failed the standards. It didn't even mention her qualifications. It was a rejection by category, an unspoken barrier. She wasn't denied because she wasn't strong enough or skilled enough. She was denied because she was a woman. That realization burned hotter than anger. She folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into the envelope. She placed it inside her desk drawer, not to forget it, but to remember it, to keep it as fuel. That night, she went for a run in the cold. Her legs ached, her breath turned white in the air, but she pushed herself harder. Every step pounded with a single thought: if they won't open the door, I'll make them regret shutting it. By the time she returned home, sweat freezing against her skin, she had made her decision. The rejection wouldn't be the end of her dream. It would be the beginning of her fight. Emma Clark wasn't walking away. She was only getting started. The sting of rejection might have broken someone else, but Emma Clark was not someone else. The morning after receiving the denial letter, she woke before dawn as usual, laced her shoes, and hit the trail. Her legs felt heavy, her chest tight, but she forced her body forward. With every step, she thought about that single sentence: application denied. The words echoed in her mind like a drill instructor barking insults. Instead of discouraging her, they hardened something inside her. Fine, she muttered under her breath as she pushed uphill, sweat dripping down her temples. If you don't see me yet, I'll make you. Her days became even more rigorous. She wasn't just training anymore. She was punishing herself into perfection. She ran with a 40-pound rucksack strapped to her back until her shoulders bruised. She swam in lakes so cold her skin turned numb and her lips blue. At the range, she practiced for hours, shooting until her arms shook and her thighs. Her ears rang. One evening, after firing her last magazine, she noticed an older man watching her from the corner of the range. His posture was straight, military sharp, and his weathered face carried the look of someone who had seen more than most could imagine. "You're wasting ammo," he said, walking closer. Emma frowned, slightly defensive. "Excuse me? Your forms clean, your groupings tight, but you're emptying rounds without purpose. You want to be a SEAL?" Her eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" The man smirked. "You're not exactly subtle. I trained candidates for years. I can spot the ones who want it bad. Most burn out, few keep going." He extended a calloused hand. "Jackson Hayes, retired SEAL." Emma hesitated, then shook his hand firmly. Over the following weeks, Jackson became her unofficial coach. He didn't go easy on her. In fact, his methods were brutal. "Push-ups aren't just numbers," he barked one morning. "Every rep is a decision. Decide you're tougher than yesterday, or don't bother." When she complained of exhaustion, he cut her off. "Pain's a privilege. It means you're still moving. Remember that." Under his guidance, Emma discovered new levels of endurance. He taught her to run farther with heavier loads, to swim with precise efficiency, to control her breathing under stress. At the range, he forced her to shoot after hours of exhausting drills, testing her accuracy while her muscles trembled. "You won't get a clean battlefield," he explained, "if you can shoot tired, cold and shaking, then you're getting closer. Despite the intensity, Emma thrived under Jackson's mentorship. For the first time, someone wasn't doubting her. He was demanding more because he believed she had more to give. Months passed, and Emma reapplied for SEAL training. This time, her application carried new weight-advanced diving certifications, survival course completions, and scores that eclipsed many male candidates. She mailed it with renewed hope, bolstered by Jackson's words, "If they judge skill, you're in. If they judge gender, you'll know what fight you're really in." When the response finally came, Emma tore it open with trembling hands. Her heart sank. Another rejection. No mention of her scores. No acknowledgement of her improvements. Just the same verdict. Not accepted. Emma sat at her desk, fists clenched. The rage was different this time. The first denial had hurt because it questioned her worth. This one hurt because it ignored her worth entirely. She wasn't failing their tests. They weren't even letting her take them. That night, she showed Jackson the letter. He read it slowly, expression unreadable, then handed it back. "So," he said finally, "what's next?" Emma's jaw tightened. "I apply again." Jackson studied her with a hard gaze. "Most people would quit." "I'm not most people." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Jackson nodded approvingly. "Good, but maybe next time, you don't just send papers. You make them look you in the eye." Emma raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Jackson said, leaning forward, "the Navy can bury your application. But they can't bury a public demonstration. If they see what you can do in front of witnesses, veterans, maybe even the press, they won't be able to pretend anymore." Emma thought about it all night. It was risky. People might laugh, dismiss her as a publicity stunt. But deep down, she knew Jackson was right. Words and numbers on paper weren't enough. If she wanted the Navy to acknowledge her, she'd have to force them to. The next morning, she showed up at Jackson's place, with determination in her eyes. "Tell me how to prove it," she said. Jackson smiled faintly, as if he had been waiting for those words. Training intensified. Emma's daily runs turned into weighted marathons. Jackson submerged her in freezing water until she learned to regulate her breathing in near hypothermia. He introduced combat drills, obstacle courses, mental tests designed to push her breaking point. And through it all, he drilled one truth into her mind. The system won't hand you respect. You take it. Emma's body toughened, but so did her spirit. She learned to ignore pain, to focus under exhaustion, to silence the voice of doubt. Nights that once ended in soreness now ended in pride. By the time months had passed, Emma was no longer just a determined applicant. She was a force of will, sharpened into form. And when Jackson told her about the upcoming Navy outreach event in Norfolk, an event where officers and recruits would gather, where demonstrations would be held, Emma knew her moment had arrived. This time, there would be no envelope, no silent rejection. This time, they would see her with their own eyes. She would give them no choice. Emma's determination was no longer a secret. By now, whispers of her ambition circulated through her small Virginia town. At first, people dismissed it as a stubborn dream, something she'd eventually outgrow. But as months turned into years, and as her rejections only fueled harder training, even the doubters began to notice she wasn't letting go. Some admired her resilience. Veterans especially respected her, though some remained cautious. At the local diner, retired Navy men often shook their heads while sipping coffee. "Girls got guts, no doubt," one said. "But SEAL training isn't a hobby. It'll break her." Others were harsher. "She's chasing something impossible," muttered another. "Not her place." Emma heard the words, sometimes directly, sometimes secondhand. Each remark dug at her, But she never let them see her flinch. If anything, the doubts became fuel. While others used doubt as a reason to stop, Emma used it as ammunition to keep going. Jackson reminded her constantly, the louder they doubt you, the bigger the shock when you prove them wrong. Their training sessions had grown legendary at the local gym. While most members left after a neat hour of cardio, Emma stayed until the lights flickered, completing circuits that broke seasoned athletes. Weighted squats, endless push-ups, rucksack runs, she pushed herself until sweat soaked the floor and her body screamed. People started gathering to watch, shaking their heads in disbelief. "She's insane," one whispered. "She's disciplined." Jackson corrected, overhearing. At the range, Emma's precision had reached a frightening level. Jackson introduced distractions, shouting, noise, even blaring sirens over a speaker to test her focus. Nothing broke her rhythm. Each shot landed where she intended, grouping so tightly that even the range officers muttered in surprise. Still, none of it seemed enough. On paper, the Navy continued rejecting her. The system remained unmoved, a wall that refused to notice her fists pounding against it. One night after a grueling session, Emma sat on the gym floor, back pressed against the wall, legs stretched out. Sweat plastered her hair to her forehead, her arms trembling from exhaustion. Jackson crouched beside her, his face more serious than usual. "You know what this feels like?" he asked. Emma tilted her head, too tired to answer. "War," he said. "Not the kind with bullets, though you'll get that too, but the kind where you fight something bigger than yourself. A system, a tradition. It doesn't move unless someone forces it. You ready for that kind of fight?" Emma swallowed hard, staring at the floor. She thought about the rejection letters tucked neatly in her drawer, the laughter she overheard, the ache in her muscles every night. Then she looked up at Jackson. "I've been ready my whole life." That answer lit something in him. He didn't. Smile Jackson rarely did, but a flicker of pride showed in his eyes. In the weeks that followed, the idea of a public demonstration became more real. Jackson suggested the Navy outreach event in Norfolk, an annual affair designed to recruit and inspire. There would be officers, young candidates, veterans, and likely some media coverage. "If you want to prove yourself," he said, "do it where they can't look away." Emma hesitated at first. The thought of standing in front of a crowd, knowing half of them would expect her to fail, twisted her stomach. But fear had never stopped her before. And if Jackson believed this was the next step, she wouldn't argue. Word spread quickly once the plan was set. Friends tried to warn her. "Emma, what if you choke?" "What if you miss?" She shrugged. "Then I miss." But at least I missed where everyone saw me try. The night before the event, she hardly slept. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the rejection letters replaying in her mind like ghosts. But instead of haunting her, they steeled her. Each denial, each word of doubt, was a spark. By morning, her nerves had turned into resolve. The Norfolk Navy outreach event buzzed with activity. Young men lined up to perform pull-ups, push-ups, and timed runs while recruiters observed with critical eyes. Families walked between booths, children tugging on their parents' sleeves to see the demonstrations. The air smelled of hot dogs from vendors and salt from the nearby bay. Emma arrived in plain workout clothes, no fanfare. She tied her hair back, her expression calm, though inside her heart thudded hard enough to echo in her ears. She walked past rows of recruits who whispered and stared. Some recognized her. Her repeated applications had made her somewhat infamous. Among local circles, "There she is," one muttered. "The girl who thinks she can be a SEAL." Officers noticed too. One in particular, a stern-faced commander with sharp blue eyes, frowned at her presence. He had seen her applications cross his desk more than once. He stepped forward, blocking her path. "This event is for recruits," he said. Emma met his gaze steadily. "Then let me demonstrate." He raised an eyebrow. "Demonstrate what?" "My skill. My discipline. What you've been rejecting without cause." The commander's lips tightened. For a moment, Emma thought he would order her off the grounds. But perhaps curiosity or pride got the better of him. With a dismissive wave, he allowed it. "Fine. Let's see if you're as persistent in action as you are on paper." The crowd stirred. Recruits whispered, veterans leaned in, and children tugged their parents closer. Emma walked calmly to the shooting range, lifted the rifle, and positioned herself. Her hands didn't tremble. Her breathing stayed steady. This was it, the moment she and Jackson had prepared for. She looked once at the target, then blocked everything else from her mind. The doubts, the whispers, the officer's stares, none of it mattered now. All that mattered was the bullseye. Her finger brushed the trigger, and with a sharp crack, the first shot split the air. The Navy outreach event at Norfolk Naval Station had the restless buzz of a county fair mixed with the sharp edge of military discipline. Recruits jogged in formation across the field. Vendors sold coffee and fried food, and families roamed between. Booths stacked with glossy brochures, showing men in perfect uniforms storming beaches. For most visitors, it was a day of curiosity and spectacle. For Emma Clark, it was a battlefield. She walked through the crowd in plain training gear, black joggers, a gray t-shirt, her hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun. No medals, no uniform, no permission. Just her presence drew stares. "Is that her?" someone whispered. "Yeah, the girl who keeps applying." Emma ignored them. Every step she took toward the shooting range felt heavier, as if the whole event shifted around her. She spotted Navy officers in their crisp uniforms, their expressions cautious, almost irritated. They knew her face from the applications that crossed their desks. To them, she wasn't just an outsider, she was a nuisance who refused to take no as final. One officer, Commander Pierce, stepped forward as she neared the range. His expression was flat, but his eyes carried impatience. "This event is for recruits," he said evenly. Emma met his gaze without flinching. "Then let me demonstrate." Pierce folded his arms. "Demonstrate what?" "That I'm qualified, that I'm ready, that I belong here." Murmurs rippled through the recruits behind him. A few smirked, already imagining her failure. Others leaned forward with curiosity. Pierce sighed, as though debating whether it was worth the trouble. Finally, with a dismissive wave, he said, "Fine. The range is open. Show us what you think we've missed." Emma nodded once, calm and controlled. She turned toward the range, every nerve alight. The shooting line stretched before her, targets standing tall in the late morning sun, the smell of gunpowder lingering in the air from previous demonstrations. She stepped forward, picked up the rifle laid out on the stand, and felt its weight settle naturally in her hands. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Don't force it. Control it." She positioned herself, feet firm, shoulders squared. The crowd hushed, curiosity pulling them closer. Even children stilled, sensing something important was about to unfold. Emma breathed in deeply, letting the air fill her lungs. Then she exhaled slowly, lowering her heartbeat. In this moment, there was no crowd, no officer, no rejection letters. There was only her and the target. She squeezed the trigger. Crack! The bullet struck dead center. A ripple of murmurs spread across the crowd. Emma didn't pause. She chambered the next round, fired again. Crack! Another bullseye. By the fifth shot, silence had replaced murmurs. By the seventh, even Commander Pierce leaned forward, his expression hard to read. Emma kept her rhythm steady. Breathe, aim, fire. Not a single tremor touched her hands. Her training with Jackson had conditioned her to fire under exhaustion, distraction, even near hypothermia. Compared to those sessions, this felt almost calm. Shot 8. Dead center. Shot 9. Dead center. By the 10th, a low chant started among the recruits. 10 for 10. Some laughed nervously, unable to believe what they were seeing. Others fell completely silent, their skepticism unraveling with every perfect strike. Jackson, standing at the edge of the crowd, kept his arms crossed. He didn't smile. He didn't clap. He only watched, eyes locked on his student. 11, 12, 13. Each bullet tore through the same hole, the cluster so tight it looked unreal. Emma's breathing stayed even, her focus absolute. 14. Dead center again. Now the air was electric. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore, they were holding their breath with her. Each person knew this last shot wasn't just another bullet. It was the moment that would either cement her legacy or confirm every doubt. Emma adjusted her grip, her fingers steady on the trigger. She inhaled slowly, exhaled, and fired. Crack! The 15th shot punched through the exact same circle. 4. A heartbeat. Silence blanketed the range. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then suddenly, the crowd erupted. Recruits shouted, veterans clapped, even skeptical families gasped aloud. A sound of disbelief and awe filled the air. Emma lowered her rifle calmly, her expression controlled. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply set the weapon down and stepped back, letting the target speak for her. 15 bullseyes, 15 perfect shots. Commander Pierce walked forward slowly, his jaw tight. He stared at the target, as though trying to find a flaw. There was none. He turned back to Emma. "This doesn't change regulations," he said. Flatly. Emma met his gaze, her voice steady. "Then explain those regulations to them." She gestured toward the recruits, the veterans, the crowd who had just witnessed her perfection. The applause swelled again. Veterans called out words of support. Even some recruits, those who had smirked earlier, now looked at her with wide-eyed respect. Jackson stepped forward finally, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "You just watched her outshoot half the candidates you'll accept this year. You can bury her paperwork, but you can't bury what you just saw." Pierce didn't respond. He turned away, lips pressed thin, clearly unsettled. Emma remained calm. She hadn't come for applause, and she hadn't come to humiliate anyone. She had come for proof. Proof that she wasn't just a dreamer, or a stubborn applicant, or a nuisance. She was capable. She was undeniable. As the crowd slowly dispersed, whispers lingered in the air. Reporters scribbled notes. Recruits replayed the shots in their minds. Veterans muttered, "That girl's the real deal." Emma picked up her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and walked away quietly. She didn't need to stay. The demonstration was finished. The message was clear. For years, the Navy had rejected her without ever truly seeing her. Now they couldn't look away, and Emma knew, deep in her bones, that the wall she'd been pounding against had finally cracked. For several seconds after Emma's 15th bullet hit dead center, silence ruled the range. It was the kind of silence that came not from absence of sound, but from shock, as if everyone present was struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Even the gulls circling overhead seemed to pause, their cries stilled by the weight of the moment. Then the whispers started. 15. She hit all 15. No way. Did you see that grouping? That's impossible. Nobody's that precise. The silence fractured into applause, then cheers. Veterans clapped with calloused hands. Recruits shouted in disbelief. And even parents in the crowd joined in, their voices carrying across the open field. Children pointed at the target, tugging their father's uniforms, asking if they could shoot like that someday. But Emma didn't bask in it. She lowered her rifle, set it neatly on the bench, and stood tall, her expression calm, almost detached. There was no grin of triumph, no smug look toward the officers. She hadn't come to prove her ego. She had come to prove her existence. Jackson moved through the crowd, his steps measured. He didn't clap either. His approval wasn't about noise. It was about recognition, and as his eyes met Emma's, a subtle nod passed between them, the quiet acknowledgement that she had done exactly what she needed to do. Commander Pierce approached slowly, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on the paper target, riddled with a cluster so small it looked like one hole torn wider by repetition. He wanted to dismiss it, to reduce it to chance or trickery. But there was no hiding what had just unfolded in front of dozens of witnesses. "This doesn't change regulations," Pierce said finally, his voice low, defensive. Emma's gaze didn't waver. "Then explain the regulations. Explain why skill doesn't matter." "Not to me," she gestured toward the crowd. "To them." The murmur rose again, voices carrying like waves. "She's better than half the candidates here." "Better than me," admitted a young recruit under his breath, his pride crumbling into awe. A veteran barked out, "Damn right she is," followed by loud applause. Pierce looked around, unsettled. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone outside the system. Regulations had always shielded him, but today those same rules left him exposed, standing before a crowd that had seen truth with their own eyes. Another officer leaned toward him, whispering sharply, "This is a PR disaster if we don't manage it." Emma caught the words. She wasn't meant to, but she did. A flare of anger rose in her chest. The idea that her skill, her discipline, her years of training could be reduced to public relations. But she didn't let the anger show. She kept her voice even. "I didn't come here to embarrass you," she said. "I came here to show you I'm ready, that I've been ready. You don't have to accept me today, but you can't pretend you didn't see this." The crowd erupted again, this time with sharper intensity, their cheers directed not just at her performance, but at her defiance. Emma had spoken what they were thinking. The truth was undeniable now. Pierce's lips pressed into a thin line. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his shoulders stiff. Other officers followed, some whispering, others simply avoiding eye contact. The split among them was clear. Some were angry, others shaken, and a few intrigued. Emma stepped back from the range, picking up her bag. As she slung it over her shoulder, she could feel eyes burning into her back, some filled with admiration, others with resentment. It didn't matter. She hadn't come to win their approval. She had come to prove that rejection no longer defined her. Jackson fell into step beside her. "You just cracked the wall," he said quietly. Emma didn't answer immediately. Her body was calm, but inside, her heart was still racing. Not from nerves. Those had been silenced with the first shot, but from the weight of what came next. "They'll fight harder now," she said finally. Jackson's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Good. That means they know you're a threat." The hours after the demonstration unfolded like a storm. Word traveled fast. By the time Emma reached her car, her phone buzzed with messages from friends who had seen clips on social media. Someone had filmed her 15 shots and uploaded it, the video already spreading beyond the event. "Girl denied SEAL training lands. 15 bullseyes in public demo." The caption alone was enough to ignite debate. Comments poured in. Some hailed her as an inspiration, a symbol of persistence and equality. Others mocked her, calling it a stunt, claiming she couldn't last a day. In real SEAL training, Emma ignored it all. She didn't measure herself by comments or applause. Her proof was in the target, in the precision of her shots, in the silence that had gripped the crowd before the 15th bullet struck home. That night, she returned to the range. Alone this time, no crowd, no officers, no whispers. Just her and the targets under the harsh glow of floodlights. She lined up another 15 shots, her body moving with the same rhythm as earlier. Every round hit the center. Every round reminded her why she kept pushing. The applause at Norfolk was already fading into the noise of public opinion. But the discipline, the endless mornings of running, the nights of freezing swims, the bruises from rucksacks, the hours of training under Jackson's unforgiving eye, that was what sustained her. She knew the Navy wouldn't roll over. Regulations didn't bend easily. Tradition didn't shatter overnight. But now, for the first time, she wasn't knocking on the door alone. The crowd had seen. The veterans had cheered. The recruits had whispered their respect. The wall wasn't down yet, but it had cracked. And Emma Clark was ready to drive the wedge deeper. By dawn the next morning, Emma's life had shifted. The video of her 15 bullseyes had spread across platforms overnight, ricocheting from one corner of the internet to another. Headlines framed her performance in bold letters. Denied. SEAL candidate shocks crowd with flawless shooting demo. The woman who refuses to take no for an answer. Should the Navy change its rules? Emma scrolled through the articles on her phone with bleary eyes, sitting at her kitchen table, a mug of black coffee cooling untouched beside her. She hadn't asked for this attention. She had wanted recognition, yes, but for skill, not spectacle. Yet she knew better than to resist the current. Publicity was a weapon, too. By noon, reporters parked vans outside her modest townhouse. Microphones jutted forward whenever she stepped outside. Emma, how did it feel hitting 15 straight bullseyes? One shouted, "Do you think the Navy discriminated against you?" Asked another. Emma offered only measured answers. I train hard. I show up every day. That's what matters. She avoided inflammatory statements, no matter how much reporters pushed. She wasn't fighting for headlines. She was fighting for entry. She refused to let the story twist into something about politics alone. Jackson watched the coverage. From the corner of the room, arms crossed. "Careful," he muttered. "They'll build you up just to enjoy tearing you down." Emma nodded. She knew it was true. Public opinion was a wave, powerful, but fickle. At the Pentagon, however, the conversation was far less casual. Clips of Emma's performance were played in conference rooms, paused and replayed, her posture and precision dissected like battlefield footage. Some officers dismissed it outright. "Shooting targets is not combat," one sneered. "A circus trick proves nothing." Others weren't so sure. "Public sentiment is shifting," another countered. "Every denial letter we issued is being scrutinized now. If we ignore her, we look outdated. If we let her try, and she fails, at least we can say we gave her the chance." Commander Pierce sat in silence, his jaw set like concrete. He hated that the conversation had even reached this level. To him, SEAL training wasn't about bending rules or appeasing crowds. It was about preserving standards that had broken thousands of men. "She wants to prove herself," he said finally. "Fine, but don't think for 1 second survive Hell Week. The ocean doesn't care about headlines." Meanwhile, Emma's days grew heavier. When she wasn't dodging reporters, she was still training. Every morning, before the sun painted the horizon, she ran 5 miles along the sea. Shore, sand dragging at her boots. In the evenings, she swam until her arms burned, waves crashing against her body like fists. But now, everywhere she went, eyes followed. At the gym, strangers approached with shaky smiles, asking for selfies. At the diner, Old men who once doubted her now tipped their hats. Children whispered her name like she was a character from a Carrie's movie. The attention unsettled her. She hadn't changed, not in her own eyes. The miles were just as long. The weights were just as heavy. Yet to the world, she had become something else. A symbol. One night, sitting on the porch with Jackson, she confessed the fear gnawing at her. "They're making me into an icon," she said. "Icons don't bleed. They don't fail. But I'm human. What happens if I stumble? If I miss just once?" Jackson lit a cigarette, exhaling smoke into the dark. "Then you stumble. Then you miss. And then you get back up. That's the difference between an icon and a soldier. Soldiers keep moving, no matter what anyone thinks." His words steadied her. Still, she couldn't shake the pressure. The debate raged louder each day. Television panels argued late into the night. Some experts championed her cause. If she's as skilled as the footage shows, why shouldn't she at least try? Standards don't have to drop. Let her attempt the same course as any man. Others resisted. SEAL training is not a stage for experiments. It's life or death. Lowering the bar for one person jeopardizes the integrity of the entire force. Emma watched these debates from her living room, sometimes amused, sometimes furious. People who had never run a mile in boots or carried a rifle in mud were dissecting her life like sport. But she reminded herself, every word spoken about her was another crack in the wall. One evening, as she left the range, a group of young women approached timidly. "Miss Clark," one said, clutching a notebook, "you're the reason I started training. If they can't stop you, maybe one day they can't stop us." Emma froze, caught off guard. She hadn't thought of herself as a trailblazer. She just wanted her own shot. But now, seeing the light in the girl's eyes, she realized something bigger was happening. Her fight wasn't just hers anymore. Behind closed doors, the Navy's discomfort deepened. Emails leaked, fragments of discussions about potential accommodations, damage control, and policy optics. The public pounced on every hint of progress. One commentator put it bluntly, the Navy can either let Emma Clark attempt training or risk looking like they fear her success. That line echoed across headlines, irritating commanders but thrilling Emma's supporters. Emma didn't gloat. She doubled her training instead. If the door cracked open even an inch, she wanted to be ready to storm through it. Jackson watched her push harder than ever, sometimes to the point of collapse. More than once, he pulled her up by the shoulders, forcing her to stop before her body broke. "Discipline doesn't mean killing yourself," he warned. "It means lasting long enough to win." She listened, mostly. Late one night, unable to sleep, Emma returned to the rejection letters still tucked away in her drawer. She spread them across her table, paper after paper stamped with the same cold denial. "We regret to inform you. Regrettably, your application cannot be considered. We must uphold current regulations." She traced the words with her finger, each one now feeling less like a wall and more like a stepping stone. They had tried to bury her under paper, but those very letters were now fueling the fire that threatened to engulf the Navy's rules. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. "You made them notice. Don't stop now." A friend in uniform. Emma stared at the screen, heart racing. She didn't know who had sent it, but she understood the meaning. Cracks were forming inside the Navy itself. Not everyone was against her. Some were watching, waiting, maybe even rooting for her. For the first time, she felt not just like a fighter on the outside, but like a soldier preparing to breach. The world knew her name now. The Navy couldn't hide her story in the shadows anymore. But Emma Clark also knew. The louder the spotlight, the harsher the storm waiting on the horizon. And Hell Week wasn't just on a training schedule anymore. It was coming for her life. Weeks had passed since the Norfolk demonstration, but the echoes of Emma Clark's performance still reverberated. The Navy could no longer ignore her. Every day, new articles surfaced, each more insistent than the last. Debates flared in military circles, in newsrooms, and online forums. Veterans praised her grit. Critics complained. Public sentiment pressured officials who had long relied on inertia to avoid tough decisions. One morning, Emma received a formal letter from the Navy. Her hands trembled slightly as she tore the envelope open, though she had already imagined this moment countless times in her head. Inside, the words weren't cold or dismissive. They weren't simple rejection. Instead, they carried a weight of reluctant acknowledgement, conditional acceptance into sealed preparatory training. Your prior applications have been noted, as have your demonstrations of skill. You will be allowed to participate in the upcoming training cycle, contingent upon meeting all initial physical and medical standards. Her chest tightened. The words were real. After years of rejection, months of grueling training with Jackson, and a public demonstration that had captured the nation's attention, the Navy had finally given her an opening. Jackson clasped her shoulder. "This is it," he said, his voice steady. "They've recognized what we already knew. But don't mistake this for a victory. It's the start of the real battle." Emma nodded silently. She felt a mixture of triumph and apprehension. She had proven herself in front of the world, but the SEAL preparatory training was not a performance stage. It was Hell Week incarnate, designed to break even the strongest, most disciplined men. The weeks leading to the preparatory cycle were merciless. Emma pushed herself harder than ever. Every morning began before dawn. She ran through freezing rivers, her breath billowing in mist, every muscle trembling. Weighted runs along coastal cliffs tested endurance. Jackson introduced new drills, impossible sequences of pull-ups, rope climbs, and underwater swims. "Fatigue is part of the body's rhythm," Jackson reminded her. "You'll need to embrace it, not fight it." Emma did more than embrace it. She made it a weapon. She would simulate every aspect of SEAL training at home, carrying logs over her shoulders for miles, dragging heavy sacks across sand, swimming under ice-cold water for minutes that felt like eternity. Every day she imagined the obstacles she would face, rehearsing solutions with the precision of a chess player anticipating moves. As the date of the preparatory training approached, nerves began to gnaw at her. She had proven herself publicly, but she knew the real challenge would strip away everything she had relied upon before. There would be no spectators, no veterans cheering, no cameras capturing the precision of her shots. Only the relentless instructors, the unforgiving ocean, and her own body fighting against exhaustion. One night, she confided in Jackson, pacing. The floor of his garage turned makeshift gym. "What if I'm not enough? What if they finally test me properly, and I fail?" Jackson stopped mid-pull-up, his gaze locking on her. "Emma, the Navy doesn't decide if you're enough. You decide. They can throw waves, obstacles, and hours of sleep deprivation at you. They can push you to your breaking point. But the choice to endure, to move forward, is yours. They can't take that away." She absorbed the words, but still felt the weight of doubt. Even the strongest can falter when standing on the edge of Hell Week, and she knew that perfection in the public eye could only carry her so far. Her family offered quiet support, though they too struggled with the enormity of what lay ahead. Her father, a retired Marine, didn't coddle her. Instead, he reminded her of what he had always drilled into her: discipline, resilience, and mental toughness. "You've trained for this," he said. "You've trained for years. Don't let anyone else define your limits." Her mother, less military in her demeanor, but no less determined, placed a hand on Emma's shoulder one evening. "We're proud, Emma. Whatever happens, You've already shown the world something remarkable." Emma nodded, but in private. She kept replaying Jackson's words, her father's lessons, and the memory of every rejection letter she had received. She understood that pride would not carry her through the long, punishing hours of the preparatory training. Only preparation, discipline, and an unwavering will would. When she finally arrived at the training facility, the energy was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The ocean's waves slammed the shoreline with a ferocity that seemed almost personal. The air smelled of salt and gasoline from the docks. Recruits hustled in groups, bodies lean, eyes focused, already competitive. Emma's arrival drew stares, some questioning, some impressed. She was the woman who had made headlines, the one who had defied expectations and claimed public recognition. But here, in this moment, she was just another recruit. Nothing more. The instructors were intimidating, their voices harsh, their expectations immediate. Every misstep was corrected, every hesitation scrutinized. Emma quickly realized that skill alone would not be enough. She needed endurance, mental toughness, and the ability to recover faster than anyone else. Jackson's voice echoed in her memory. "Embrace fatigue. Make it your weapon." The first few days were relentless. Early morning runs along the beach. In freezing water, obstacle courses that tested balance and strength, endless calisthenics, and hours of swimming until muscle failure. Sleep was minimal. Food was limited. The instructor spoke little, but judged everything: posture, focus, stamina, teamwork. Emma's body ached in ways she had never imagined. Her muscles burned continuously, yet she pressed forward, drawing on years of preparation. Every pull-up, every lap in the ocean, every sprint in the sand reminded her of the journey that had brought her here. She was no longer training for approval, for headlines, or for validation. She was training for survival, and for the chance to stand as a seal among the men who had once dismissed her. By the third day, the mental toll became more apparent. Instructors pushed recruits to the edge, simulating real combat stress, sleep deprivation, and extreme physical strain. Some men collapsed, shouting or crying. Others silently endured, their eyes hollow but determined. Emma matched them rep for rep, pushing through pain that would have forced others to stop. During a grueling swim against strong currents, she remembered the first Bullseyes at Norfolk. She remembered every rejection letter. She remembered her father's quiet encouragement and Jackson's relentless demands. Her fingers dug into the sand as she pulled herself onto shore after the final lap, lungs burning, eyes stinging with salt water. She had earned this. No one could doubt her again. At night, alone in the small bunkroom she shared with other recruits, Emma allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection. She wrote in her journal, detailing every exercise, every thought, every emotion. She didn't write for anyone else, only for herself. This record was a testament to the miles she had run, the bullets she had fired, the months of relentless preparation, and the battles, both internal and external, she had endured. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic breathing of her bunkmates, some snoring, some tossing, some awake with fear and anticipation. She allowed herself a small smile. She wasn't just fighting for acceptance anymore. She was fighting for her right to stand among the best. The preparatory training was only the beginning. Hell Week, the crucible every SEAL faced, loomed ahead. And Emma Clark knew she was ready. Not because she had impressed the public, not because the Navy had finally acknowledged her, but because she had chosen, every day, to be relentless. No obstacle, no prejudice, no exhaustion could stop her now. Hell Week arrived like a storm. Emma Clark stood on the cold sand of the Pacific coast before dawn, the waves rolling in violent sheets. The wind whipped across the shoreline, cutting like knives against exposed skin. Behind her, men muttered, nervously, pulling on wetsuits, adjusting weight belts, and whispering about what awaited them. Emma did not flinch. This was it, the crucible that had broken thousands. Not just physical endurance, but psychological resilience, mental toughness, and the ability to push beyond human limits. Emma had trained for this moment for years. But now that it had arrived, every nerve screamed in anticipation. Jackson's words came back to her. Fatigue is your weapon. Pain is your ally. Endure, and you will prevail. The first obstacle was the surf landing. Instructors shouted orders over the roar of waves. Swim 500 meters to shore with fully loaded packs, and run through a sand and water obstacle course. Emma plunged into the icy ocean, arms slicing through freezing water, legs pumping against. The undertow. Her lungs burned, salt stung her eyes, and waves slammed her body repeatedly, yet she pushed forward. Every stroke was a choice, every breath a victory. She reached shore with dozens of recruits collapsing behind her. She barely paused, sprinting toward the first obstacle, a massive wooden wall coated in mud. Hands scraped, muscles screamed, but she scaled it with the efficiency of someone who had prepared for this exact moment. Behind her, instructors barked, testing focus under exhaustion. Every time a recruit faltered, they were corrected, berated, or forced to repeat the task. Emma's mind didn't waver. She thought of every rejection letter, every dismissive glance from recruiters, every journalist who doubted her. Each memory became fuel. Over the next 24 hours, Emma and the other recruits endured one grueling challenge after another. Log carries through knee-deep surf, underwater swims holding rifles overhead, continuous calisthenics with little sleep, rucksack marches across muddy fields. Their bodies screamed. Some recruits faltered, vomited, or collapsed entirely. But Emma pressed on. At one point, they were forced to swim 200 meters fully clothed, including boots, while carrying a teammate who had collapsed from exhaustion. Emma's arms trembled, her lungs burned, but she powered through, the ocean pulling at her like it wanted to claim her. Reaching shore, she helped her teammate up without hesitation and pushed forward into the next obstacle. Instructors tried to break her spirit. "You think you're ready?" One yelled, dripping with disdain. "This isn't a photo op. This is survival. If you can't endure, you'll quit." Emma's reply wasn't spoken. It was action. Each obstacle, each lap, each crawl through mud reinforced her determination. She refused to quit. Night fell, but there was no rest. Recruits lay on the wet sand, drenched and shivering. The instructors had designed sleep deprivation as a weapon. Emma felt her eyes burn, her body ache, but she pushed herself upright, repeating drills while the wind and waves battered her. Sleep became a dream she could not afford, her mind teetering between hallucination and focus. Some recruits whispered about quitting. Emma heard them, saw the fear in their eyes. She wanted to tell them, don't let them decide your limits. Decide for yourself. But she stayed silent, conserving energy, focusing inward. By the third day, Hell Week's intensity reached a peak. The recruits faced a simulated mission, carrying heavy loads through forests, crawling under barbed wire, navigating obstacles with blindfolds, and engaging in timed shooting exercises. Emma's body ached everywhere. Cuts from the mud and rope. Burns dotted her arms and legs. She had long ago learned to dissociate from pain, treating it as a metric, not a barrier. When they arrived at the final shooting exercise, fatigue weighed heavily. Muscles shook, breathing was ragged, and instructors circled like hawks. Emma set up her rifle. She remembered Norfolk, the crowd, the 15 bullseyes, the impossible focus. She breathed deeply, blocking out the exhaustion. Each shot was deliberate, steady, and true. Her targets fell with the precision of years of practice. The instructors nodded, some begrudgingly, some in awe. Emma had proven her skill, but more importantly, she had proven her endurance. The final trial was a long, continuous ocean swim. At night, the water was near freezing, darkness enveloping everything. Recruits were to swim 4 kilometers, carrying weights, navigating rough waves. Exhaustion would claim most before completion. Emma's body screamed with every stroke. Her arms and shoulders quivered. She felt her muscles tighten painfully, and her lungs threatened to betray her. She focused on rhythm, stroke, kick, breathe. Every thought of pain was converted into determination. She imagined the first time she fired a rifle, the rejections, the public demonstration, Jackson's relentless training. You endure. You survive. You are unstoppable. By the time she reached shore, Emma's body was battered, her face raw from salt water and wind. Her limbs trembled, but she did not collapse. She had completed the swim while many around her had faltered. She had endured what others could not. As dawn broke over the ocean, instructors gathered the surviving recruits. The numbers were grim. Nearly half had dropped, exhausted or broken. Emma stood, her wet hair plastered to her face, mud coating her uniform, breathing ragged but steady. She had survived Hell Week. Commander Pierce approached her, expression unreadable. He studied her, noting the cuts, the bruises, the exhaustion that should have been crippling. Then he looked at her eyes, clear, unwavering, resolute. You did what most cannot, he said finally, voice quiet but firm. You endured everything. Hell Week threw at you. Your skill, endurance, and determination are undeniable. Welcome to the SEALs, Clark. A murmur rippled through the other recruits, some stunned, some applauding quietly. Emma did not smile immediately. She had expected this moment to feel victorious, but the weight of years of struggle pressed on her chest. Jackson stepped forward and clapped her on the shoulder. You made it, he said simply. Emma finally allowed herself a small, exhausted smile. She had done it, not for fame, not for headlines, not even for the Navy. She had done it for herself, for every day. Of doubt, every bruise, every rejection. Later, in the debriefing room, she sat quietly as instructors detailed what had happened, analyzing every step, every drill, every decision. She listened, noting areas to improve, already thinking ahead. There was no celebration, only the quiet satisfaction of accomplishment and the awareness that the path ahead, deployments, missions, and challenges she had yet to face, was just beginning. The public had seen her 15 bullseyes. The Navy had finally acknowledged her skill. But Emma Clark had proven something more profound: resilience, discipline, and the refusal to let rejection define her destiny. Her story, which began as a series of no's, had culminated in achievement through relentless preparation, unwavering focus, and sheer human will. She had shattered barriers, not just for herself, but for anyone told they couldn't succeed. And as she stood on the shoreline, looking out at the waves that had tested her so mercilessly, she felt a quiet, undeniable truth settle in her chest. She had earned her place, and no one would ever deny her again.